It's not on? Okay. Wait, it is on.
Barely.
Yeah, barely. Hello, friends.
Hi.
Welcome to the first ever annual WKU Forensic LGBTQ Showcase. Program is Queer and Here, a night of LGBTQ plus performance, or celebration actually. And that name is really significant because for years and years and years, there have been plenty of queer students, queer faculty and staff, and of course allies on WKU's Forensic Team. So why the first showcase now? In a time where tons of crazy things are going on, and people, queer people especially, and our trans folks are fighting for basic human rights, it's important that anybody who has the privilege to speak out does so. And that's why we are doing this now, and we are loud and we are proud, and we want everybody to be able to celebrate their existence. So this night is going to be exactly what it said it's going to be. It's going to be a celebration. It's going to be performances, and you're going to be informed, and it's going to be great. And welcome everybody who came in. It's so nice to see you here. So we're going to switch moods now, and we're going to showcase an impromptu speech. Now, if you're not in forensics, an impromptu speech is a person comes up, they have two quotes that they've never seen before, and they flip them over, they read both, they pick one, and then they have like 2 seconds to make a speech. It's crazy. I don't do it. What's really fun about this is that the two quotes that Anthony is going to pick from are both from queer icons, past and present. So there's one quote from Black transgender activist, drag queen, and Stonewall writer Marsha P. Johnson. And then there's also another quote from the one and only Lady Gaga. Hey. So we had to have the balance. So Anthony, can you come up for us, please? And Ben has your time.
One minute. Earlier this year, rap group Brockhampton released their newest album. Shortly after, other rap artist Eminem had repeatedly released songs that were blatantly homophobic. In spite of this, Brockhampton decided to release an openly gay album, whereby they highlighted love songs from the queer community, such as Something About Him, where instead of running away from their perceived flaws or issues in the rap community, they highlighted them and made their album one of the top grossing albums in September of this year. It's this idea of us embracing our perceived flaws or insecurities that's exemplified in today's quotation from Lady Gaga. I will allow myself to fail. I allow myself to break. I am not afraid of my laws. Here, Gaga is saying that instead of breaking or faltering under her insecurities or things that she isn't comfortable in, she embraces them. Thus, what we can take from this is that we should embrace our insecurities. And I agree for 2 reasons. First, because it helps to prevent violence. And second, because it allows us to overcome these flaws. For Brockhampton, by having concerts and albums where they openly go against things like Eminem, where he is encouraging violence against queer folk, they're able to discourage this same kind of violence from reemerging and making people able to accept these things. Because of that, the first reason why we should embrace our insecurities is because it helps us prevent violence. Let's explore this first through Nucleus's theories of insecurity, and then apply them to Boys Town, Chicago. Nucleus is a postmodern philosopher who discusses about security, or the way in which we handle perceived problems. He says that instead of trying to run towards issues and use things like military might or violence to solve them, we should instead embrace this insecurity as an inevitable part of life. Basically, we all know that there will always be threats or things that might harm us, but instead of running those things down like we did after, let's say, 9/11, we should instead accept that terrorism might always be a threat and not massacre people in the Middle East. This idea can be applied to Boys Town, Chicago. Boys Town, Chicago is one of the most openly gay towns in America. It's a small suburb in Chicago where they police themselves among gay people. They recognized that the police in Boys Town were regularly enacting violence on them for their sexual orientation or identity. Thus, they decided that they should embrace the insecurity that there might be robberies or murders, and instead get rid of police entirely. Thus, Boys Town, Chicago is the only city in America that is entirely policed by their residents, enabling them to decrease violence that was being physically enacted by the police, and instead take care of the problem for themselves, or embrace the insecurity of violence. Thus, through Nucleus's theories of security applied to Boys Town, Chicago, we saw that we should embrace our insecurities because it helps to limit violence. But for Brockhampton, they were able to highlight their identity or perceived flaws, and thus became one of the highest grossing albums in 2018. Thus, the second reason why we should embrace our insecurities is because it allows us to overcome these perceived difficulties. Let's explore this first through Cuba, and second through Jared Polis. In Cuba, they've had a really hard time existing or growing their industries, with the United States imposing harsh sanction on them since the beginning of the Cold War. In spite of this, Cuba has been able to have one of the strongest biotech industries in the world. This is because instead of worrying about their perceived flaws or difficulties in the form of getting no help from any Western country at all, they instead use their benefits, being a communist country and having a good source of natural resources and environment to draw off of, effectively utilizing their benefits instead of worrying about their flaws to enable them to have one of the largest biotech industries in the world. Second, Jared Polis became the first openly gay governor to be elected in 2018. He was able to win the election of Colorado's governorship by embracing his flaws or perceived difficulties. Instead of running away from the fact that being an openly gay politician in America is really, really hard, he embraced this perceived difficulty and he let his partner give the first person speech as after he was elected. Thus, Jared Polis was able to embrace his perceived insecurity and get something good about it, thus benefiting himself and hopefully soon the state of Chicago. Proving that we should embrace our insecurities for Colorado, not Chicago, because it allows us to overcome these perceived difficulties. So, when returning to today's quotation from Lady Gaga, "I will allow myself to fail, I allow myself to break, I am not afraid of my laws," we saw that we should embrace our insecurities. First, because it helps to prevent violence, and second, because it allows us to overcome these difficulties. So, for Brockhampton, they were able to revolutionize the rap community by being openly themselves in their album that was recently released, and thus profit off of it.
Yes, Anthony, Lady Gaga could never. So one thing that WKU Forensics is really excited about was, this is a celebration, right? And we are not the only queer representation on campus. So I'm really excited to introduce this next person. This person's name is Francis Wilson. He is a digital rhetoric studies major from Akron, Ohio. He is a communication researcher and narrative coach for politicians and nonprofits. And today, he will be sharing a story about his relationship with his father and how growing up the namesake of his fundamentalist Catholic father, shaped his perspective and experience as a gay man.
Wow.
Please welcome Francis Wilson to the front.
This story is something that I personally have been wanting to say and share aloud for years. And I am so blessed to be able to tell it here, and I'm so glad that this platform is the first of many. Thank you. So if you give me your ears, I will give you my heart just for a couple minutes. Love is love is love is love is love is love. When I came into this world, my father held me in his arms for the first time, and with all his heart said my name aloud, Paul Francis Wilson. It was his name, no junior, no second. It was his name, through and through. And he vowed that day to be the best father he possibly could, to teach me the things that I needed to learn in order to succeed and be the best man I could. Taught me things about the Bible and about Jesus. Taught me things about being a principled and God-loving man, to be honest and patient and obedient, and how to love. Fast forward to the spring of my 5th grade year. Me and my pop were sitting in the white, dirty Astro van work truck at Swenson's spot 49. It's a typical thing for us. After we get our order taken, he looks over at me, he goes, Paul, the reason why we're here today and why we took you out of class today was because my mother and I believe that school isn't teaching you what you need to learn about this particular subject. His dirty plumber, grimy hands reach down and get some scrap paper and starts to draw a little bit. Really crude anatomy. And he holds this up and he says, you know what this is? It's a vagina. He goes back to the drawing board, he scribbles down a little bit. You should know what this one is, Paul. It's a phallic. I say, what's a phallic? He says, it's a penis. On that cloudy Wednesday spring of my 5th grade year, in that dirty white Astro van, my dad gave me the talk. And I didn't know up until so many years after that half of that would be completely useless to me. When I was younger, I used to think that love was so simple. I grew up with my parents teaching me and me believing in unconditional love, love without limits. And I grew up with them telling me, I love you, Paul, I love you, no matter what. And I grew up believing that one day I would find that Catholic girl to stick together with forever. And that would have... Still ridiculous. That I would raise beautiful Catholic children with them and die with her in my arms. Back then, love was so simple, and I didn't have a reason to question that it would ever change. But then my body began to change and tell myself a different story that I thought I would never be telling myself. And it was making me question what was true and right and good. Love became something else very quickly. It wasn't a daydream. It wasn't a desire. It wasn't true, nor right, or good. Love became confusing. Love became painful. I was 20 years old when I came out to my parents. 20. 3 years after I knew myself that I was gay. And I stayed here in Bowling Green that summer because I knew that if I was going to go back home that weekend that I would be kicked out and shunned from my family. After I came out to my dad, I was met with pure silence. And then he called me one day. And I remember vividly sitting in some house that I was cat sitting for, right outside on Park Street, looking out the window at a family getting their child out of the car and walking up to church. And then my phone begins to vibrate and my dad's name popped on the screen. And I panicked. I had no idea what to do. And I pulled as much together as I could. And I pretended like this was just a small phone call. And I forced myself to pick it up. Hey, Pop, how's it going? Rolling my eyes at that. He said, hey, Paul, I'm doing well. I'm just sitting here with a glass of Pinot Noir. And your beautiful mother's in the kitchen making dinner for me. How are you? After a little bit of bullshit back and forth, he finally got back to me. He said, Paul, I love you, but I put on mute. I didn't want him to hear me crying as he continued, I love you, but you are unnatural. Quoting Leviticus, you shall not lie with a male as you would a woman. That is an abomination. He said, Paul, you're unnatural. In that moment, I realized that my father would never accept the man that I had become, the man that I'd grown to be, his namesake, his son. In that moment, I realized that it was no longer unconditional love. Love is love is love is love is love. When I came into this world, my father held me first in his hand, and with all of his heart, he said my name aloud, Paul Francis Wilson. It was his name. No junior, no second. It was his name through and through. And that name has haunted me my entire life, being the living symbol of everything that he needed me to be, but I never could give him. And so I hung up the phone, and I began to go by a different name. Francis. Thank you.
WKU Forensics are not the only people that have stories to tell, and there are tons of stories on this campus that are so worth telling. The perfect, I think, piggyback to that is, keep going. I'm gonna keep
Tell
going.
an
The perfect piggyback to that is we invited the Queer Student Union to come and to just give us whatever they wanted to give us, tell us what's going on campus, what they offer us. And I think Francis's story really highlights why that's important. There's so many struggles that queer students especially can go through, coming to school and then having to deal with anything that's going on at home. And so it is a privilege to have the knowledge and to have a group, a safe space on campus. A lot of people don't have safe spaces on their campus, or they don't have safe spaces at home or wherever they are. So I think it's really important that we take advantage of the fact that we have a queer student union that is looking forward to teaching us, and hopefully we get to interact with them more. So I'm going to invite up Director of Education for QSU, Cassidy Canton.
I don't know how to work technology. Hi everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really excited to get to speak in front of you. I do not have an amazing performance, nor do I have an amazing story, but I do have a PowerPoint. Yes, I am with the Queer Student Union. We're really excited. We're trying to revamp the organization and really get more students involved and really establish ourselves as a safe space for LGBTQ students and really make sure that we're reaching out to them and providing them with what they need. So I first want to kind of start off with our statement of purpose. We're kind of reworking our constitution, and we just rewrote this, so I'm very excited. So our statement of purpose is, Queer Student Union will form a legitimate body of students that work to improve student life for students of all gender identities, gender expressions, and sexual orientations through outreach, support, and education. We talked a lot about, what are our goals with QSU? We don't just be like a social organization. We want to do outreach. We want to educate. And we really decided that QSU can be all of those things. And we really want to fill that role of not only providing a safe space for those students, but also getting out into the community and really getting to inform them about things that concern LGBT students. So for outreach, we're going to try and really use social media and print media to endorse events for QSU and other queer-related events on campus, and try and also get that out to the greater Bowling Green community. And to try and just kind of get the discussion flowing about issues for queer students, what kind of things nationally, locally are impacting them, how can we help them more, how can we provide for them more, and just kind of making sure to get the community and the queer students all linked into one. Unity. And then also kind of going off of that, we also want to provide support for our students here. So that safe space, primarily we're going to try and get organized in the Pride Center. We've had a couple of meetings already. They've been pretty successful, a good turnout. And we just want to make sure that queer students on this campus know that they have a place, that they have a group of people who love them, who support them, and are going to provide resources around to help them with any of the unique kind of problems or struggles they might be facing during their 4 years here on campus. And then for education, which is what I'm doing right here, hello, we want to reach out to the community and to other places on campus to provide accurate information on LGBTQ issues, and also kind of identities and how to be an ally. I think it's sometimes confusing to navigate, especially with all the different types of issues that are going on. How do I, maybe as a person who's not queer, I am, but if you're not, how do I really be an ally? How do I help? And even within the LGBTQ community, I think we can do better to make sure that we're helping our fellow man. I don't fully understand trans issues. Someone might not fully understand someone else's issues. So just really making sure that we're all supporting each other and have a good information on that.
Amen.
As well. So just some additional resources outside of QSU. We do have the Trans and Non-Binary Club. This is just a confidential group for anyone who is trans, non-binary, or questioning their gender identity. And then if you're interested, since it is confidential, I'd definitely encourage you to reach out to qsu.tmb@gmail.com. They'll give you the information and all that good stuff. Another great organization is Bowling Green Fairness. So that's a community campaign. They're working to provide legal protections for LGBTQ plus individuals in housing, employment, and public spaces. They have a really, really awesome website, fairnesscoalition.org. They've done a lot of really awesome stuff for the past couple of years. And then we also have the Intercultural Student Engagement Center, or ISEC. So they're just here to kind of promote diversity and inclusion on campus and also provide resources to students who might be struggling and helping their academic success and retention overall. And all of their information is also wku.edu/ISEC, very easy to remember. And then so I really encourage you to get in contact with us. You can come visit visit us at the Pride Center. It's on the second floor of DSU, so it's just downstairs, room 2084. It's kind of in that back, weird donut-y shaped area, if you know what I'm talking about. And we have meetings on Thursdays at 4:30. You can feel free to join us. It's completely open. We would love to have you. We do a lot of fun activities, discussions, all kinds of good stuff. We also have an Instagram page at QSU WKU, not WKU QSU. It's reversed. I always get it wrong. And then we also have movie nights. They're hosted by one of our members, one of the e-board members. Her name's Saber. And our next one is on Wednesday, November 28th at 7 p.m. It's in mass media, and the movie will be Pride. So come out and see that. They're going to also be having them next semester, so I encourage you to come to those. They're really fun. Lots of people hanging out, watching a movie. And we also have a zine that Saber also runs. This month's theme is about sex ed. So if you'd like to make any submissions, it can be art, writing, a collage, whatever you do, just feel free to reach out and send it to Saber's email, which is up there. And she'll feature it in there. She'll pass it out at different events on campus. They're really, really cool. We have some extra in the Pride Center if you want to take a look. But that is all I have. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Cassidy will be around after to talk. And then, of course, Google is amazing. Just type in WKU Pride Center and you can find a lot of that information too. So that'll be really great. This is going to be our final performance of the night. So, a round of applause for sophomore Ryan Gosling performing Prose.
Ravi doesn't believe it at first. The zombie doesn't look the way he imagined it would when his mother explained why they left a line of salt outside their bedroom door. And then he thought a zombie should look hunchback and desiccated, like the twisted body of a man blackened by fire. Something that is living that should be dead. But as the zombie emerges from the club, it looks like it could be another gay man in the village in a tailored peacoat and Converse in a face that would be cute if it wasn't so long. But as it nears, Ravi knows it is a zombie because she can smell the Brazil nut trees and the hot packed earth and the yellow-tongued orchids opening in the sun. Why are you here? He says. The zombie says nothing. For displaced cultures throughout the world, folklore remains a vital means for transmitting centuries of traditions, customs, and beliefs. And when it comes to understanding who we are and where we come from, sometimes these stories are all we have, making us far less likely to examine them critically, allowing outdated and unhealthy messages to influence us via the Trojan horse of cultural preservation. Author Ian Minusoir explores the particular difficulties of queer people of Caribbean descent, facing a complicated history with sexuality and gender expression, ultimately asking, what happens when the monster haunting your grandmother's bedtime stories turns out to be you? Saltlines by Ian Minusoir. Somewhere between the fizzy hairs of his drunkenness and old fear sparks, he tosses his cup at the curb and starts down the long street. He glances over his shoulder. and sees that the Jumbi is there, keeping pace, its pale eyes trained on him. So he hails a cab, and as it pulls away, the Jumbi follows. Ravi tries to call to mind what little he knows about the creature. The first time he heard the word was back in Guyana soon after his auntie's death. His mother became convinced that a Jumbi lived in the space beneath their house and ran its nails along the floorboards at night. His father said that her sorrow made her mad. But all the same, he left a line of salt outside of her bedroom door. His mother explained that a Jumbi could not enter their room until it has counted each grain of salt, one by one. And by the time it was finished, the sun would have risen, and the Jumbi would have to go back to the place where only darkness can live. Ravi tries to call to mind what more he knows about the creature. But he has spent long years trying to forget this part of his life. It'll be 15 even, the driver says. Ravi realizes his car is parked to the curb to his apartment. Up the stairs and inside, he locks the door. In the kitchen, he grabs a container of molten salt off the shelf, and before going to his bedroom, he pours it in a haphazard line that runs the length of the door. He closes his blinds and he peels off his soap clothes. He grabs his cell phone. It has been about 5 years and 8 months since he has last spoken to his father. After he came out, after he moved out, a silence stretched between them that grew colder and wider until even a phone call seemed impossible. He might not recognize the number, he thought. Oh, his father wouldn't even care. Huh? His father wouldn't even care about the monster from the jungle of his son's childhood. Ravi dials a number. As the phone rings, a different sound startles him. He wills himself to believe that it is just a change in the rain's tempo. But the sound isn't coming from outside. It's coming from the other side of the door. And then a whispering, 3, 4, 5. And then his father picks up. Hello? It's me. Ravi. No, father. Ravi. 31. 32. Father. There's a Jumbi. I wasn't sure who else to call. 61. 62. Father, I need you to tell me what more I must do. No, father. His father says that it's getting late and you are making your mother upset. And then the line goes dead. Shit. Ravi realizes that the Jumbi has stopped counting. The doorknob turns, and the creature stands in the doorframe. Its peacoat still on. And staring at the beast's waxy face, he remembers with such sudden clarity something he has not thought about since coming to America. The first gay man he ever met. the first anti-man, as his father would say. Rohan had this big brain laugh and his beautiful mustache. After it came out that Rohan had been cheating on his wife with other men in the village, they burned him at the jungle's edge. Ravi didn't see it happen, but he could smell the body the next morning. It was so strong that the villagers, they tried to mask it with Brazil nut trees in the hot packed earth. And the yellow-tongued orchids opening in the sun. Rohan. Ravi leans back on the bed. He grabs the container of molten salt off the shelf and pours it in a line that runs from his collarbone down to his waistband. He invites the Jumbi over. It licks up the first grain of salt. Ravi pulls him in deeper, opening his wide mouth. And he tastes salt and rum, ash on the wind, and the memory of home.
For Cassidy and Francis. I just want to really quick thank our Director of Forensics, Gaynor Newman, and our Director of Event Coordinator, Chris Chandler, for helping us coordinate this event. It literally could not have happened without them willing to do anything we needed them to do. So please, a round of applause for them. Also, the biggest round of applause and huge shout out to my co-planner, Natalie Hedberg. She's amazing, she did everything, and she's super great. And thank you guys for coming. Thank you all for being here. It was really great. This is the first annual, and it is not the last. And we're looking forward to continue to showcase throughout the year. So thank you guys for coming.